So, Jeff, how are you doing?
Today is another wonderful day.
Oh, really? Good for you. What makes it so freaking wonderful?
Well, I'm headed off. I think it's Thursday next week to northern Saskatchewan for a canoe trip.
Oh,
So, being an entrepreneur, being a business owner, being a podcast host, there's a whole bunch of when you have a social media presence, you need to pre-record a bunch of material to
yeah,
schedule it to go out.
yeah.
So it the world kind of thinks you're still there, but they're not certain. But maybe he is, maybe he's not. So this morning I recorded 3 podcast interviews, episodes, and then I'm editing another one I did with somebody who's a trying to break through in the emergency management field as a contract firefighter. He owns a private firefighting company. Now these are quite popular and useful in the oil and gas industry, in the mineral industry up north, away from
Yeah,
metropolis centers, right?
right, right.
And so they fill the gap and they are the surge capacity, and they've been helping out a great deal last year with our wildfire season, which was crazy and out of
Yeah,
control in Canada, right? A lot of that surge capability was filled by corporate firefighters, by
yeah,
the private sector.
right.
The problem is that a lot of people within the emergency management field have an ideological barrier to the profit motive entering what they seem as a non as a zone that should be occupied by the public sector and
Mm,
not for profit.
mm.
And so he's trying to be a voice of reason to say, we're here, we're just as trained as everybody else.
Yeah,
We're only charging the same rates that a municipality would
yeah,
to help another
yeah, yeah,
municipality.
yeah,
So there's no profit motive there, but it's kind of pushing one of these solutions that we're advocating for,
yeah,
which is bringing the private sector into
yeah,
emergency management.
yeah.
So it's very interesting. So yeah, I've spent 4.5 hours today talking already.
There's an interesting gap there that you allude to. And that is the public perception that an agency that is potentially government or an extension of government is a free service, when in reality it's not. Uh, it's being paid for. It's just that we don't see the bill. All right. This is one of the issues that sometimes arises when we talk about our medical system. It's free. Well, actually, it's not. There are real bills. People are being paid. That nurse, that doctor, is somewhere along the line is walking home with money. And they're being paid for their professionalism. A hospital is not just sitting there without expenses. And so we have this misperception that because we can call on a municipal fire department in order to do something, that it's free. And therefore, someone in the private sector who would send me a bill, therefore, is not the same as someone in the public sector. But that fails to realize or fails to recognize that in reality, everything has a price, period, full stop. Those public, fire departments, if you want, as agencies of government, you know, there are expenses that are pretty straightforward. You have to pay people, all right? So there's salaries. That's the obvious. A firehouse isn't free. It's a piece of property. It has, electrical connections. You have to turn the lights on. And your fire engines don't move because they happen to belong to the fire department. You need petroleum, gasoline. You need all kinds of things. And none of that for you and me does not amount to a bill or a cost or a payment. But it's no different in many senses from, say, public service like a fire department, except that we don't see the exchange of paper. We don't see the transaction. And we're so transaction oriented that if someone asks for a payment based on an invoice, then they can't be the same as public service. Well, public service is not inexpensive. Public service is not free.
No,
It's
not
simple as that.
not at all. And it's kind of like we pay for the fire department on our property tax bill, and you get so much per rate is on your property tax bill.
Exactly.
But I'm thinking, we're paying for a service that we might not personally need, but
Exactly.
it's part of our responsibility as being a member of a collective society. Like
Yes.
I think I did the calculation once. I think my provincial healthcare bill is somewhere around $6,800. I tried to figure it out as a portion of taxes, et cetera, but it's a fair chunk of money
Hmm.
considering it's 40% of the provincial budget goes
Hmm.
to healthcare,
Hmm.
right? So what if I don't use healthcare? What if I
Exactly.
don't access healthcare? What if I'm a fit, healthy 25-year-old
Right.
who's paying into the system to get a
Right.
system ready that
Right.
other than for traumatic events that may occur beyond my control to me, I don't need,
Yes.
right? But it's kind of that question of when we talk about taxation levels, which are very prevalent in today's society and
Yes.
today's topics,
Yes.
people are like, okay, I have to pay taxes, but there's that question of I see an increased level of taxes every year and a decreased level of services
Yeah.
is the argument that comes back, and that it's difficult to say that we want more services, but we don't want to pay more taxes.
Right. It gets us into that thinking process of the difference between quality care, healthy life versus emergency response. And, for most of us, the medical system exists in order to deal with our ailments, our problems. It's an emergency response, even if I'm not using the emergency, entrance and department. I go to the doctor at my age because I'm mandated to do so every year. Fine. So that, but at the same time, it is also in my hands as a responsibility that I have to live a healthy life. And I remember very early on when the Logistics Institute first started, we had quite a number of people in the healthcare industry, if you want to call it that, who were part of the purchasing and supply side of, say, the medical systems. Very interesting people. And one of the big struggles at the time it still is a big struggle, but especially at that time, because it was just emerging, was providing quality health care through the medical system versus dealing with emergency responses, right? And the fact that we have hospitals is basically to deal with emergency response. That's why you have beds, that's why you have people who have operations, and so on and so forth. Whereas among the healthcare professionals at the time, not just the professionals, but the supply chain and logistics professionals in the healthcare world, their motivation was to provide service at such a level that quality healthcare can be supported and sustained. It was an interesting dialectic, if you want to use that term, between the logistics people who were committed to quality health and the medical profession who were committed to emergency response. And this is not a criticism of either group, but it is an issue of, when we talk about preparedness, which is our key topics that we like to talk about, we have to raise the question of what side of preparedness are we talking about? The pre-emergency or the post-emergency, and that actually is the litmus test. That is the divide between the two.
Well, absolutely. And I think we're all skating on thin ice but we need to, when we have the uncomfortable conversation about personal responsibility.
Mhm.
And it's something we've skated well away from in our society, is that we, how do you fix an unhealthy population? Well, it's pointless, right? I mean, you can throw $100 million a day more at the
Yeah,
healthcare system. If the population remains unhealthy, what's
yeah,
the point?
yeah,
But we have difficulty having that tough conversation with
yeah,
people saying, it's your responsibility to
yeah,
maintain positive mental and physical health.
yes,
Okay. We can
yes,
throw financial health in there because that's important as well. But personal of your physical mind health, because as I said, and even on a podcast episode I released this week, we are often faced with rapid onset events. So
yes.
you don't see it. It's not like a hurricane track that you see coming for 3 days.
Mhm,
We have a rapid onset event. If you're out of shape, totally stressed and broke,
mhm,
that's not a great position to be facing
mhm,
adversity,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
So the population will respond better and
mhm,
be better prepared to respond if the population is inherently healthy.
mhm, mhm.
That healthy lies on the individual,
Exactly,
not on the system.
exactly.
That is a very difficult conversation to
Yeah,
have right now,
yeah,
when and to be politically incorrect, when we have a rapid increase in orthopedic surgeries that
yes,
correlate to the increase in obesity.
yes, yes,
Now it's a tough conversation to have,
yep,
but one feeds the other.
yep,
And if you keep throwing money after more surgical space for orthopedic surgeries,
yep,
but you don't examine it as some of the root causes,
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
then it's the same thing as if my transportation and shipping distribution network is junk and I just throw more trucks at it,
yes,
I'll eventually solve some of those issues. I
right.
really will.
Yeah, yeah.
Totally inefficiently, marginally effective, but totally inefficient.
Yeah, yeah,
But I'll address some of those issues
yeah.
by just throwing more at it. And that's, I think, whether it's healthcare or even preparedness. I was saying this morning that in North America in general, in your suburban urban areas, the ratio to first responders to residents is about 5,500 to 1
Yeah, yeah,
on duty at any one time.
yeah.
If you think in a significant event you're the fortunate one in 5,500, and those are the odds on which you prepare,
Mhm,
that
mhm.
your extent of preparedness is 911 will be available,
Yes.
somebody will answer,
Yeah,
and oh, by
yeah,
the way, they'll have a resource available to dispatch to help me.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hey, that's not a good place to be.
No, no, no. I can pick up on some words that you use, and I can throw all kinds of action, more than spaghetti against the wall to solve my problem if I happen to be inadequate in my ability to handle it to begin with. So I've got a lousy supply chain. I'll just get more trucks, which, by the way, is very almost impossible to get now because there are very few drivers, truck
Very few drivers. Yeah,
drivers. So
exactly.
you've already lost. But that's beside the point. It's the difference between, and you use the term, address the issue versus solve the problem.
Yeah.
Addressing the issue is actually at the shallow part. You're not digging deep enough. You're just scratching the surface here. I'm addressing the issue because I have a crisis and I'm going to spend oodles of whatever, money or otherwise, energy, in order to address the issue, which will be time sensitive because that's probably part of it, and be taken care of. That's it. But it's not solving a problem because the root cause analysis of your problem is you and your inability to actually manage properly, to run an operation effectively. There are all kinds of issues. It's a little bit like going back to the medical analogy we just used or we used earlier. It's a little bit like the difference between dealing with the symptom versus dealing with the illness. They're not the same thing.
Oh,
It's a big difference, massive gap. And most healthcare professionals will tell you that. When you go into an emergency in a hospital, they're dealing with the immediate It's a response issue, immediate concerns. Now, whether you've been shot or bludgeoned or whatever, or you just happen to be sick, they're going to deal with what they need to do in emergency. That's what emergency medicine is. It's an emergency response. However, it may be discovered along the lines or along the way that basically you might have cancer. Well, whoa, wait a minute, that's different. That's not the same thing as I fell down and I'm bleeding, or I lost consciousness, or whatever. Well, we're going to make you conscious again, but then we're going to have to deal with your real problem. And your real problem is you've got cancer. And so this is a bigger issue. You couple that with, again, what we were talking about a little bit earlier, and, quality healthcare versus emergency response. We live in a society of transference. That's a big issue. Now, what do I mean by transference? Well, in business, we'll buy insurance.
Yep.
We're transferring the problem, the crisis. No, we're transferring the risk to a third party. Right. So if I have containerized product being imported from China on a major ship, and they run into a storm and they have to jettison all kinds of cargo, i.e. containers, I have insurance that's going to cover that. And you go, okay, that's one level of response to a risk. Will it also entail that you have to shut your distribution center down? Will it also entail that you have to shut your manufacturing process down? If you don't have those, say, widgets coming in, what is it going to cost you not to assemble the car? I was quoted quite a number of years ago that it was like millions of dollars per minute if the assembly line in an automobile, I'll call them factories, we don't manufacture anymore, but an automobile factory, it's $1 million a minute. Millions. It's not just one. A minute if the line shuts down. Whoa, wait a minute. You can't transfer that risk. That risk is there. It's real. No matter how much insurance you have, business interruption or financial loss or whatever, those are caretaker approaches to your own economic business health. That doesn't make you viable. It just means you've transferred the risk to somebody else, and you as the owner or senior people might get paid back up to a point. But then there are all these people who work for you who probably will lose their jobs because you have to shut down.
Exactly. When we risk transfer in business with the insurance, this is where business continuity is supposed to fill the gap. It's
Right.
How do we carry on operations when that widget does not land in San Francisco,
Right.
or Vancouver, whatever the port may be?
Wherever.
What is our intent? And we think and we work through that issue ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
So the military calls it contingency planning. Business calls it contingency planning.
Mm-hmm.
The danger is you can go down a rabbit hole with that, with 101 different possible things that could happen with you, with 101 different events. The other way to do it is what I encourage a lot of is to think about, I get widgets from company A, but is company A the only person who manufactures widgets in the world? And so if I lose company A for whatever reason, it could be in numerous, I don't care what, but company A's widgets are not arriving.
Mm-hmm.
How do I establish a relationship with company B? And even some business continuity plans call for contingency contracting. I heard this guy phrase it once.
Oh, wow.
Where we're going to pay a retainer to company B.
Yes.
So that we get priority access to their assembly line when company A goes offline. And so as it's another risk transfer, it's like a hedge, right? they're hedging or put or a call option, depending on your viewpoint on the line. But the idea is that for me, I think it reinforces the idea that it's a team environment.
Yes.
And it's the same as when we think about, you know, I may not know everything I need to know about keeping myself mentally and physically and financially healthy, but there's a lot of people who do know how to do that.
Yeah.
And it's not that the individual is lacking the ability to do something. A lot of times it's the individual lacking access to the knowledge,
Right.
right? I don't know how to, I've never budgeted in my life. I just bought whatever I wanted. I need to budget. I don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
You gain and earn knowledge. And it's the same thing when you start to consider a team environment. And this is what I really try to push to kind of circle back to the preparedness discussion is we don't think about it as our unit of measure is always the individual.
Yes.
Our unit of measure is not the community or team, right?
Yes.
So the Logistics Institute is a team. It's not an individual.
No. Yeah.
My company is a team. It's not an individual. There are groups of people that work together with their skill sets to try to solve an issue.
Exactly.
And it's not a group of individuals. But when you see the preparedness messaging, especially right now, because we're in the middle of Emergency Preparedness Week in Canada.
Oh,
From the 5th to the 11th of May is the week where we talk about emergency preparedness
okay.
every year. There's lots of great information coming out. Perfect time to talk about it. But the unit of measure that they use from the public sector is the individual.
Yes.
I need to make Victor and Jeff
Yes.
prepared for an emergency, not Victor's community, not Jeff's family,
Yes.
not the greater resilience model.
No.
And it's the same thing. If we want to make individuals healthy, we don't do that by telling individuals to healthy. We do it by making communities healthy.
Yes.
Right. So it's that switch between we're a world of individuals to we're actually members of a community.
Yes.
And we will get far better benefits when we talk to the community by talking at the individual.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. This gets right into some of the ideas or thinking that I've been doing around these very issues. One is that as individuals, we often enough blind ourselves to the fact that we're in a stakeholder community. And we talked about this the last time, that there are participants in our well-being that we don't even think about. Right? And they're not direct, they're often enough indirect. You know, the person who, the people, more than one, the people who work for a grocery store are stakeholders in our well-being. Okay, while we don't think of that, we often enough, we should start thinking that if they disappeared, not just them as people, but if that grocery store disappeared, where do I go? What are my alternatives? It's that stakeholder approach that says maybe we should be thinking a little more strategically around preparedness. And one of the things that I started thinking about is the difference between managing risk and being resilient. They're not the same. They're not the same thing. Managing risk is a plan, right?
Yep.
And being resilient is a strategy.
Yep.
And a strategy is about thinking about all of the components in your world, and all of the components that you have an impact on because you exist. Thinking in terms of context, I live here, I don't live there, right? Thinking in terms of how we think larger, expand the circle, if you will, of our thinking capability beyond just the plan, which has X number of steps. And there's nothing wrong with the plan. That's not a criticism. What I'm saying is we need preparedness, we need planning, but we also have to widen our perspective. It says there's more here than just the plan. Because the plan, can actually fall into what I just mentioned, into a realm of transference. Oh, don't worry about it. I've got a plan. Don't have to think about it anymore. Whoa, wait a minute. Your strategic thinking is a living opportunity. It's how you live. If you have people that are part of your stakeholder community, whether it's immediate family or long-term family or just neighbors or whatever, how do you relate to them without necessarily being, Mother Teresa going out and, feeling for everybody and hoping that they all survive? That's not the point. The point is there's nothing wrong with Mother Teresa. Just make sure, because this is being recorded.
Yes.
It's more a case of people recognizing that we live in context. To put it in a different way, we live in community. I don't care, unless you're the Unabomber living in a cabin somewhere trying to design ways to kill people. We all are connected. Even if you're off the grid, there's a connectivity of some sort. Maybe your connectivity is to the world around you. The mushrooms in the woods that you live off of, potentially hunting. You're in a context. You don't just, you can't isolate yourself to the point of being out of context. It just doesn't happen. So, it's about thinking that way, strategic thinking versus process planning, needing a plan, but not putting everything, transferring all of my responsibility just to the plan.
No, I agree. And I've often said that I make myself more resilient by making my community resilient.
Yes. Yes.
I can get to a certain resilience point on my own by doing a number of activities. Risk transference is part of it.
Yeah.
Contingency planning, strategic thinking,
Yes.
moving towards goals,
Yes.
having con ops when things just go pear-shaped, because they
Yeah.
do sometimes.
Oh yeah.
But then again, it's like your context or community is that if I work to build my community resilient, then I am that much better off, because even in the world of preparedness, and I recorded this in a podcast episode this morning, that, it's your neighbors who are going to pull you out of the wreckage, not the fire department.
No. Yes.
It is going to be your neighbors who are going to provide you first aid, who are going to be knocking on the door at 3 o'clock in the morning when your roof is on fire,
Yes.
not the fire department.
No.
And it's nothing against first responders. They're fabulous. They're a required part of society, all that. But in reality, when we look at the statistics that come out of earthquake zones, the urban search and rescue, the heavy and the light urban search and rescue teams that deploy to earthquake zones around the world excel at getting the very difficult to access victims out.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of victims have been rescued and saved. I worked at the field hospital that deployed to Haiti in response to the earthquake in 2010. And the surgeons were telling me that if the surgeries aren't starting within 4 days of the event, the person's either dead from sepsis or they've chopped their own arm off. One of the two things have happened.
Yeah.
So you have to be in there right away doing surgeries, providing that type of assistance immediate. But that immediate response is your community. So when we're looking at Preparedness Week, when we're looking at generating the ideas in people's head that I'm part of a collective, that my neighbors around me are my best resource in times of stress.
Yeah.
In times of crisis, in times of calamity, even during the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
Even during the pandemic, when we were
Definitely.
restricted at what we could do
Yes.
and where we could go, and the government imposed these restrictions on us, sense of community. I think there's this a great picture that came from a cul-de-sac, and I think it was in Edmonton, where it's a typical redneck, there's 8 guys having a beer, but there's 8 guys standing in a circle 6 feet apart, having a beer in a cul-de-sac.
Yes.
Right? A sense of community. We're getting together. What do you know? What have you heard? What have I heard? And a lot of times we work on we want people to have access to information, where to know to get information. But
yeah,
in any event, and whether you're running real-time logistics or whether you're sitting in an Army operations center,
yeah,
there's always a gap between the information you want to have and
yeah,
the information you have access to.
yeah, yeah,
And you and I sitting in our streets during the pandemic were having that same very
exactly.
idea.
Yes.
And you, as my neighbor, as part of a social connection, you're going to have access to a different network than I am. You're
Yeah.
going to have access to different pieces of information that I may not have access to,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
I the same for you. And as we build those relationships within a sense of community, we start realizing I don't need to listen to 27 radio channels.
No,
I need to
no.
talk to my neighbors.
Yes. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
in the world of social media, the neighbors could be
Yeah.
everybody on your
Oh,
cell phone in your
yes.
network,
Yeah.
or it could be the people physically around you, but it's
Yeah.
still a sense of bonding and community. And
Yeah.
we miss that a great deal in what we try to achieve because we put um, responsibility. And back to the healthcare, I mean, you remember participation that was
Oh,
in
yeah.
the schools, right?
Yes.
You used to compete in elementary school to get what color badge you got
Yes.
because of how fit you were.
Yeah.
That was an award. It was considered something you strived
Yeah.
for. Could
Yeah.
you imagine putting a fitness standard in elementary school today?
No.
Oh, you think breaking up the Catholic and Protestant school system in Ontario is a tough nut to crack. Try putting in a fitness standard for graduation.
No. No. No.
Oh, or even telling kids, you get bronze, buddy. You're slow. Like,
Yeah.
you're not allowed to do that. Everybody
No.
gets participation
Yes.
medals, but
Yes.
that was part of
Yeah.
fostering a sense of healthy living,
Yeah.
starting at the community level, which ideally was supposed to be continued through.
Yeah.
You build that, and then people take that on throughout life.
Yeah. You know, as we're talking, I'm thinking in terms of diagrams, pictures. I like to visualize things. And two visuals came to mind around community of stakeholders. One is a series of concentric circles. You know, the core of responsibility is you. You have to be responsible. And then as you work around and you start branching out from me, myself, and I, and you see you've got family, and then you have neighbors, then you have this, and then you have that. And you see that you're part of an ever expanding series of circles. That's one approach. The other is the Venn diagram approach. And I'm not advocating either concentric circles or Venn diagrams, but there's this part of my world, there's this part of my world, and then there's this part of my world. And oh, by the way, at the core is where they all overlap. Maybe where they all overlap is core to what I need to begin to consider.
Yeah.
Right. Recognizing that there's the independence at the far edge of each of these circles or ellipses, but at the same time, there's a core where I sit with, say, my family, my neighbors, my whatever. It's that recognizing that all issues and events are contextual. I'm going to get back to that one. And that I, as an individual, am part of a community, whether they're stakeholders, if we don't want to use that term, or I personally like the word the word stakeholder because there's a bridge of responsibility between them and me, even if it's not an active one where we all recognize what that responsibility is. But it's my thinking that I need, in some way, shape, or form, this kind of service, if you want to put it in those terms, from that person, whether it's the grocery store or the bank or the coffee shop or the, whatever one uses, the gas station, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I find this fascinating in that, we live in a world of super connectivity. And I find it fascinating that the irony is we're totally unconnected.
Yeah.
All right. Well, and I feel sorry for young people who feel that they have, 17 million, followers. They're my friends. No, they're not. They're connected to you on this machine. That's all it is. They wouldn't know you if they ran you over out on the street. It's as simple as that. This is not to say there's disregard. That's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is trying to open our eyes to the real connections around us that have importance, significance, relevance, to me, my family, whatever other term I want to put in there. I've been spending the last 4 or 5 weeks, maybe not as long, but I'll stretch it out and put a gold star on my report card that, of course, I'm exaggerating how long it took me, but I just wrote 8 PowerPoint presentations for sessions I'm delivering in Amman, Jordan at the end of May. And one of the areas that where I will be presenting on is on strategic leadership and competitive advantage, right? Supply chain logistics as competitive advantage. You go, okay, where I focus on 2 dimensions of competitive advantage that most people don't think about. You could read the Michael Porters and all the others on, your MBA, competitive advantage, economics, and so on and so forth. Product differentiation, managing your costs. Yes. There's nothing wrong with any of that. I also bore people to death with that stuff as well. But 2 of the factors that I like to focus on towards the end of this discussion of competitive advantage is managing risk, because that is actually a competitive advantage. If you can manage risk, and I don't mean transfer risk to a third party, I mean actually be able to pivot in the face of risk, that if that widget does not arrive, what's your alternative? How are you going to pivot? Use a hockey analogy, Wayne Gretzky was great, not because he got the most goals, but because he knew how to manage the puck in such a way that the team got the goals.
Yeah.
Okay. He knew how to pivot. I can go back to that. The other is about being resilient. So the difference that I'm making between managing risk and being resilient. And one of the things I came across in my thinking and in some of the research I was doing is there are 5 or 6 elements to a guide to resilience thinking is what it's called, actually. The first one, interestingly enough, is diversity. Recognizing you're not alone. Right? The second one is connectivity. Recognizing you've got to be able to connect to people. Right? The third one is looking at and building feedback loops. What is happening? What is happening? What is happening? It's that sharing. The fourth is actually rethinking how we live in what is called adaptive systems thinking. How do I adapt?
Yeah.
Here I am in my office in Toronto. How do I adapt to what might or might not happen outside of my office as I try to go home? Right? I got to go back to that. The next is actually the most interesting. It's the 5th one, and that is continuous learning. You never stop. Right? The next one is broaden participation. Don't just go it alone.
No.
And the last one is, and it's this very strange word, if you will, polycentric decision systems. And I thought, okay, sociologists must have written this.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, oh, give me a break. Can we put this into normal speak? And what this means is you're not the sole decision maker. Polycentric means multiple centers of power, discussion, information, knowledge that goes into making a decision. That it isn't just me deciding what I want to do, but it's me deciding in conjunction with others through feedback loops, through direct communication to what do we do next or whatever, and what do we collectively decide to do. It's not what I decide to do.
No, and it's not, eventually in every organization, you're going to have a single decision maker who's going to make a call left or right. And,
Yeah.
I spent 28 years in the Army. There's lots
Yeah.
of generals. The generals don't independently make those calls.
No.
They're informed decisions, and they surround themselves with a
Yep.
staff. Now, the staff is very well structured in our continental staff system in the military, where, the G4 is the logistics, the 3 is the operations. They've got their all their key advisors are around them, providing the latest and best information
Mhm.
and providing a recommendation based upon their area of expertise.
Mhm.
And when you think of it that way, whether you're working in a position in a freight forwarding organization or whether you're working
Right.
in an emergency management office in the city of Toronto
Yep.
or whatever you might be doing, it's about understanding that there are really smart people out there,
Yep.
and you are better off seeking the
Yep.
guidance and opinion
Yep.
of people who are experts in a
Yep.
field.
Yep.
And some of that can be ego damaging to a few people along the way.
Uh,
We've all met them that,
yeah.
right? I have 3 degrees in a field. Okay, so what? Does
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
what? Like
Yeah.
I speak to everybody regularly
Yeah.
to find out
Yeah.
difference of opinions, and I continuously learn from people because I maintain continuous relationships
Yeah.
with people about me. In the end, somebody has to make a call, but
Yeah.
that call is the product
Yeah.
of inputs from across the system,
Yeah.
right? It's just, it doesn't matter what position you're in, and that's part of strategic leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. You and slight aside is a tangent here. It's also the failure to recognize. I shouldn't say failure. That's harsh. It's the narrow understanding of credentials. Okay, you've got degrees, therefore you have an expertise in certain arenas and areas. Fine, we understand that. But one of the real advantages or outputs or whatever term you want to use about being educated is recognizing you don't know everything.
Oh, it's
That's
key. Absolutely
that's
key.
that's the whole point.
Yes.
I've been in 2 doctoral programs, and what is fascinating about getting a doctorate, and you know this, is that actually you narrow your focus. Yes, you do your research all around, but you become
a tiny little niche.
you become the thesis expert in this
Yep.
particular freaking area that nobody will ever read, including you.
Yep.
So there, all right. Getting there is a broad approach where every time you start the research, you realize that I don't understand this entirely, or this, I need to do more here. That could happen during the process, it could happen after the process. But the real value is recognizing that you don't know everything and you are not a walking encyclopedia. That's the real benefit of having a so-called high-end credential. And that is the higher your credential in the pyramid of credentials, if you will, the more you realize that you don't know everything, but your curiosity is what drives you.
It does, and that can fall into experience too. I've worked with people who have 20 years of experience, but in reality, it's 1 year of experience repeated 20 times.
Yes.
They haven't learned.
Yes.
They haven't grown.
Yes.
They haven't taken aboard lessons.
Yes.
We all fail, and we fail many times, and that's part of the learning process. I think we can do a better job of accepting failure, but that's a different conversation. But we fail, we learn, we grow. I have experiences. I made a call, turns out good, turns out bad. I learn from it. We go forward. So when you do that, when I'm sitting here saying I have 20 years of experience in this very tiny niche, I'm still looking for people to help me out figure problems within this niche.
Exactly.
I'm not arbitrarily telling everybody in the world that I am the expert and I
Oh,
know more than anybody. I
yes,
might have read a couple of tens of thousands of pages of stuff in this one
yes,
little area,
yes, yes,
but even when I talk about my very narrow area of specialty, I'm still listening. I listened to a conversation with an expert today talking about one very special part of the niche, and I was like, "That's cool." I
yeah,
never thought of it framed that way.
yes,
You're
exactly.
always in a position to learn from more people
Yes.
because when you understand, it's that old argument about understanding the scientific method, understanding what science is.
Hmm.
It's sufficiently useful based upon what we know now to
Yeah.
make some decisions today.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is kind of what caught up a lot of people
Yes.
in losing institutional trust during the pandemic is
Yes.
nobody understands how science. They want a definitive answer. The world
Yes.
doesn't provide definitive answers.
Yes. No.
Science provides you the best as we know it right
Yes.
now based upon the
Exactly.
information we
In
have
context. In
in
context.
context.
Yes.
But people want science says this, so it's
Yes.
settled. And that's the one thing. If there's only a few phrases that really get me ired, and one of them is when somebody says the science is settled.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, then you don't understand a thing about
That's
science.
right. That's right.
You don't understand a thing about knowledge when
Yep.
you say
Yes.
it is settled.
Yes.
Like, no,
Right.
you're dumb. You're
No.
done. Like, you can go away. I'm done with you.
Yeah. Well, it gets us back to this, the instantaneity of a solution. Okay. Uh, okay, in certain circumstances, like in an emergency care response at a hospital in the emergency room or the emergency department, depending on what they call it, which hospital you go to, there is a need for an immediate response with a solution that goes with it. Otherwise, somebody dies, right there on the table. But anybody worth his salt knows, especially in the healthcare among the healthcare professionals, know that this is just a relief. This is not a solution. This is stopping the bleeding. Okay, you still have to go on and live. And so it opens up all kinds of doors, not the least being opportunity. Your life may change 180 degrees, possibly even 360 degrees if there is, going back to the beginning all over again. It's actually an opportunity. And again, in what I talk about vis-a-vis risk is asking organizations, companies to recognize that you might want to transfer that risk to a third party, but you might also want to look at risk as an opportunity to do your business better, an opportunity in the market. We're talking about business risk here. We're not necessarily talking about tsunamis. But I mean, even when you think about Toyota and the tsunami in 2011, what did they do? Well, because the Japanese manufacturing is so lean, they got caught. What do we do? Well, this entire factory was destroyed. So they were astute enough to have other locations where they could still continue manufacturing, because when the process goes down, this is like millions of dollars per
Yeah.
minute.
Yeah.
So they went to the Philippines, they went to Taiwan, they went here, there, and everywhere so that they could continue to manufacture. What they learned in the process was that quality standards in the Philippines and the quality standards in Taiwan, the quality standards in Korea, wherever they went, they're not the same. And they realized that despite the fact they are the gurus in quality management and so on and so forth, they didn't account for the differences of geophysical contexts. And now you might say, oh, come on, steel is steel. Well, actually, steel is not the
No,
same
no, no,
everywhere in
it's
the
not.
world. Come on,
It's
there's no
not.
such thing as just steel.
Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't exist. Steel coming out of China is not the same as steel coming out of, say, Pennsylvania, okay, in the US, or steel coming out of, say, Czechoslovakia. Well, sorry, used to be Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic, to correct myself. It's not the same. And there's nothing wrong with the differences so much as it depends on what you're going to use the steel for. Right. And so your end game is part of your, first line of decision making. And there's the feedback loop right there. And so one tsunami taught Toyota several things. One, lean processes and lean manufacturing is a problem. Two, simply transferring to another location is not necessarily the solution, because you didn't take into account the context of the location you're transferring to. And for me, that is the most incredible series of lessons to learn. Now, what do you do with that? I have no idea what Toyota did, and I didn't go into the MBA analysis of it. But quite frankly, if they haven't learned the lesson as to what to do, and if they haven't, reorganized their company around the learnings,
Yep.
then they're just going to repeat their problems, because tsunamis are tsunamis. It's reality.
And it's either going to be a tsunami or a man-made event or something that
Doesn't matter.
occurs. We all have critical points within our supply chains, our processes that put it there. And to speak of your risk, I was thinking those companies that go into emerging markets. So right now, there's a lot of talk about the stands, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan,
Yep.
pulling away politically a bit from the prior Soviet regime and trying to extend themselves as new locations for manufacturing and distribution hubs.
Yes. Yep.
Now, it's a new environment. It's a very politically controlled environment. Maybe not as much as China, but still, there's very much a planned economy and a planned government intervention. But how do you manage that risk without avoiding the opportunity? And I think that's really key for businesses when they think about that risk management is I can't buy an insurance company to offset the risk of losing my shirt in Turkmenistan, but I have the opportunity to be a first early adopter here in this opportunity to break out into the region, to build relationships in this region, to show confidence in this region. Nobody else is right now. And I'm going to invest in it, which gives me huge social capital with the country and the leaders of the country. But I'm making this leap with a pretty significant amount of risk. Right. So how do you offset the, I mean, there's lots of ways. And again, this is not an MBA class on how to offset. Somebody from France, probably scam. I'm not going there. But the whole, there are ways to offset risk, and we can go into a whole bunch of, we're not going to go into MBA discussions how to do that. But it's the idea of, I want to take this opportunity. This opportunity is great. I think it's an incredible thing. It comes with risk. How do I manage that risk? And talking and chalk walking your way through that to come to a solution is likely going to involve more than you. It's going to involve a team of organizations, and saying, it's simplified. It's a cost benefit analysis. If I do this and it works versus what if I do this and it doesn't work, which one of those, the risk of one, does it outweigh the opportunity of the other? And that transcends not just a business decision in Turkmenistan, but whether you're willing to take that pivot leap and quit your corporate job because you really think this entrepreneurial idea will go.
Part of that is also potentially the bad effect of Cartesian thinking, that there's always a right answer at the end of the process, the logical process. If one were to embrace more Asian thinking, Cartesian engineering is all straight lines. You go from point A to point Z, and point Z is your end goal. And along the way, you might create boxes, and then lo and behold, you got a bridge. Thank you very much. Whereas for, say, classical Chinese thoughts, it's basically, especially Taoism, it's basically circles. You begin here, but it's really no beginning, because the circle comes back, and therefore you can't find a beginning. You just choose what part of the circle you want to land on, not start on, but land on.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's a totally different way of thinking. And I know this sounds like I'm about to lose the entire discussion, but I'm not, because it gets us back to the differences between the way we think here in the West, and that is we compartmentalize. I'm either an entrepreneur, or I work in a big corporation, and therefore I'm a boss or a manager or a whatever. And therefore the company is bigger than I am, and so they go about doing their thing, and I play my little role. Or I'm an entrepreneur, and I go out and find new opportunities and make $1 bazillion. Okay, fine. That separation of entrepreneurialism and managerial skill is really a series of skills. Why isn't there a crossover? And what we just discussed is, taking the risk to go into, say, one of the stands in order to invest in an opportunity with all of the social as well as financial capital that's associated with that. That's an entrepreneurial mindset. And so we're talking about taking a risk as an opportunity because we see possibility. Are we assured that it's going to be realized, that the possibility is going to turn into potential, and that the potential is going to, bring in a great crop of whatever? The answer is no. But that's a risk that, in a positive sense, that we embrace because we have this drive. Whereas if we're in a structure, and a corporate structure in particular, whether it's military or bank or what have you, we're not there to explore the opportunities so much as to maintain the key performance indicators. Okay, it's a KPI approach. Okay, and if you're really on frontline, then it's definitely KPI, because that's what you're being, or the SOP, standard operating procedure. There's nothing wrong with either of those. However, at what point do we bring an entrepreneurial mindset into a structured organization? Now, in some senses, that's a very dangerous thing to do, because a hierarchy of decision making is very important to life and limb. Okay, that's military, very much so. You've got to be careful about suddenly being the wingnut, with an AK-47. We don't want that. But at the same time, even in the most structured organization, where do we expect people to think on their own? And I'm reminded, because I'm old enough to remember, the commercial that FedEx once had about their frontline person making a decision to use a helicopter to deliver an item on behalf of a customer. Now, the costs, in many senses, would have negated any possibility of someone making that decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he was supported as the kind of person that we want in our organization who will make a decision in order to deal with customer satisfaction or customer care or any term you want. Why? Because the customer comes first, right? And you would hope from a business point of view, you wouldn't have too many renegades like that, because that's a pretty expensive, approach to final decision done on done on the cuff in some senses. But at the same time, you go, this is pretty cool. And to have some people like that do it, not everybody, thankfully, but some people do it is worth, the price of dinner in an expensive restaurant. It really is. I think in terms of big companies who have these outliers, that's who they are. They're outliers. And I on my Instagram, I get reels, videos, or whatever you want to call them. I'm giving my limitation on tech language here. And they from two different FedEx drivers. No, I'm sorry. I apologize. It's not FedEx. It's UPS. What has Brown done for you? The one is in New York. This fellow's in New York, and he lip syncs the most incredible rock and roll music, and he videos it. All right, and then he uploads it into Instagram. Then the other fellow, both young guys, the other fellow dances to rock music, sometimes wearing his brown uniform. And you go, okay, wait a minute. If FedEx were not FedEx, if UPS were a stodgy organization, they would have cut these two off at the knees. I said, you can't do this. You're embarrassing us. When in reality, both received commendation letters from the president of UPS for being who they are, genuine, and for doing it with your uniform on.
And a lot of that is organizational culture, which is so important to our health of, even when I was in the Army, I was often an author of some pretty wild ideas about how to redo things or do things in a different way. I'll give you a prime example. Like when we were in Kandahar and we were dealing with the Taliban, we plopped 303 sea containers down in a supply area, right? The Taliban weren't getting there. That's not the kind of enemy they were. It was safe, etc. When we came to design the current deployment that the Canadian military is in Latvia, the discussion, and this was well over a decade ago. This is what are we? Where are we going to put everything? NATO came and said, you need to have 30 days of fighting stocks, whatever that may be, whatever you bring in theater, like not back in Canada, but here.
Yeah, here.
And I put the question going, you know what? We've built this mentality as a culture in the organization that everything dropping into one spot is efficient, effective, and easy to manage. Forget the fact we screwed that all up, but that's a whole different conversation. Putting it all together makes it easy to manage.
Yes.
But when your opposition now is a military that's quite capable of hitting that target from the other side of the world,
yes,
you've now put one shot, one kill, and it's all over for you. Now nobody's eating, nobody's shooting, and nobody's driving because all of your stuff just got removed.
Yeah.
So it's context.
Yes.
But the culture of the organization that I used to be involved in doesn't learn well.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I don't know what they have now. And if I did, I probably wouldn't say it on the open source. But the point being is that people make decisions based upon what their bosses tell them is the right way to do it. Yes. Because a lot of our hierarchical organizations, promotion is based upon replicating the behavior of those people ahead of you. Yes. Whereas when you have healthy cultures like that, that embrace differentiation, embrace diversity in the sense not of an ideological diversity,
Yes.
but diversity in ideas and how
Yes.
to do things.
Yes.
When cultures embrace that, they're far healthier.
Yes.
And the corporations do far better when they see, hey, listen, this person loves doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
What more could we ask for than somebody who swings their legs out of bed in the morning and can't wait to get after the job that they have the opportunity
Yes.
to do? And we create that culture. Now, whether in today's TikTok world that's doing dances to music to demonstrate it and then celebrating it, you know, or is it the various TikTokers who are very shy about releasing their actual jobs and what they do for a living because they don't really want to associate the two? And we see a lot of pushback nowadays about people's social media profile,
Yeah.
and those that have vocal profiles
Yeah.
are somewhat some of them get terminated because of their social media
Yeah.
presence is an extension of the company they work for.
Yeah.
And so it's huge on the culture side. And I think that's something that we don't tap into very well. Some companies do a really good job of it. Companies like Costco have an incredible work culture. I mean, they have exceptionally low turnover
Yeah.
in their staff. People who work for Costco like working for
Yeah.
Costco.
Yeah.
People who work for Canadian Tire, they like working for
Yes.
Canadian
Yeah.
Tire. It
Yeah.
is a great corporation. They love working for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and it's just something that we miss the value of embracing culture and being a bit. Now there's like old stooges probably shook their head at those videos for UPS. You know,
Oh, I'm
senior
sure.
VP distribution East Coast
Oh,
probably didn't have that on his bingo card,
no, he didn't. I'm sure. I'm sure.
but he probably had an assistant who said, hey, you don't look at the number of followers this individual's getting, look at the number of likes that they're getting,
Yes.
and look at the profile that you're
Yes.
earning.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And then
Yeah.
they're like, oh, okay.
You could almost think, surmise, think, speculate, whatever term we want to use, of, here's this person posting, lip syncing, he's got his brown uniform on, he's in the van, he's in the truck. Okay, there's no mistaking, this is UPS,
Yeah.
period, full stop. Right, he's actually a driver. And what's fascinating is you can almost see the hierarchy going, oh, we just discovered this, next level. Oh, this has got to, we better bring this up to, this is public, we better go to the president, right, who's relatively new, by the way, and see what she says.
Yeah.
Right, because we need a top-down decision here. Okay. And what does she do? She sends out letters of recommendation saying, fantastic. Right? Yep. Going around the entire system of people who see this as a potential problem. Is it a problem? Maybe. I mean, if he was doing something really off the wall, then you'd say, okay, maybe we better stop this. Think about it. This is a UPS driver in New York City. Okay, you couldn't think of a worse place to be a UPS driver than in New York City. There, you do not win. Period. I mean, you've got traffic, you've got pedestrians, you've got people screaming at you, you've got people probably trying to shoot you. I mean, give me a break. Okay. It's New York. I know New York. I love New York, but it is Wackyville. All right. There's no way this is just normal, right? Because New York is not normal. And here's a man who lip syncs these incredible rock and roll songs, whether it's a female singer or a male singer, it doesn't matter.
No.
Right? Whether it's romantic and it's I love you, or it doesn't matter, but he is so obviously enjoying himself. that you just say, this man loves his job.
Mhm.
That's really what's being said here. This man loves his job.
And that is wildly beneficial to public facing persona of the company.
Exactly. What better face do you want on your organization than if you have some guy caught in a wackadoodle context who actually enjoys himself?
And when you look at, if I'm a major customer and I'm looking for a corporation or a courier company, I'm going to look at, I know FedEx, Purolator, and UPS and DHL, they're all going to get my package there with the
That's
same
right.
percentage of accuracy,
Right.
right?
That's right.
And there might be slightly changes in their rates depending on the volume and
Yeah.
type, whatever.
Yeah.
But when I see a company like that,
Yes.
that embraces that kind of organizational culture and celebrates its employees doing some fun, interesting things,
Yep.
that tells me a whole bunch more about how the company's run,
Yes.
right? It's like when you look at, and sometimes corporations fail to understand this, when you look at the corporate union environment and the relationship during bargaining, that speaks a lot about companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some companies have regular strikes.
Mm-hmm.
Some companies have regular labor issues,
Yep.
contested labor issues.
Oh yeah.
And some companies have strong unions and
Yeah.
great
Oh
relationships
yeah.
with their unionized employees.
Yep.
The contracts are negotiated, they're signed
Yep.
on time, they
Yep.
don't have labor disruption.
Yep.
They share great benefits, and it's an incredible environment. And then you look at the other side. And if those two companies are competing against each other, and I'm looking to use those two sets of services, well, that's a key
Oh.
information, because how you treat your employees tells me a lot about how you're going to
Exactly.
treat me
Exactly.
as your client.
Exactly.
Right. So if you're in an abusive relationship with your union, I probably don't want to do business with you.
Yeah. 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 Because who knows if my stuff is ever going to arrive or if it's going to disappear somewhere, because your employee hates you. Okay, so we're going to take it out on the customer so that you lose the customer. I mean, there's a whole thinking process here.
Oh, but
Yeah.
it goes through the whole organization.
Oh, totally, totally. One of the funniest, again, a story, total aside, a bit tangential. One of the funniest experiences I had with union people is I was in a meeting in Ottawa, and this was when we were a sector council, and there must have been 20 different sector councils there. One of the mandates of sector councils and how they got funding from the HRSDC, which is what they were called at the time, was that you have to have employer-employee representation. So one of the sector councils had, employees represented by union, which was really interesting. And you've got to picture this massive table of about 20 different people, all, and I'm opposite of this guy who was across this huge table. It's like a massive gap, chasm between him and me. And he's not only union, but he's Scottish union, which means if he had a bomb or whatever, and if he were a pure Luddite with an accent that I couldn't understand anyway, he would have probably wanted to kill me just because I was wearing a suit. And this was just like, and he and I locked horns. And you gotta picture this. This is a room of all these people who, of course, want to have peace in front of government representatives so that everybody gets their funding. And what does Victor do? He starts an argument with this union guy. And we went after each other with tongue and tooth and fang and claw and this and that and the other and that, on and on and on and on. And it just went on until one of the directors said, okay, I think it's time to, finish the meeting. And I said, fine. And I must have been as red as a beet. And he was red as a beet. And how Scottish can you get when you've got that fair skin and it's just like, this is the bull enraged. And I looked at him and I said, so when do we go get a beer? And he said, as soon as this nonsense is over. And so we went and we had a beer.
Yeah.
So, what did we do? We did what we had to do on opposite ends of the spectrum, because not because we were posing, but because this is our actual conviction, right? Yet we're both human beings.
Yep.
In the end, it's a beer. It has nothing to do with your conviction versus my conviction. This is the argument is not about hate. The argument is about positioning. Right? After that, then we could go and have a beer because we've made our points. Nobody won, but we've each made our points. Now let's go and have some lager. And it was
Yeah.
the funniest thing. You know, everybody else was going, how could you go out and have beer with him? I said, why not? He likes beer, I like beer. What's the problem?
Yeah. What seems to be the issue here? I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it comes right back to the one of the center issues that I talk about online all the time is we've lost the ability to have heated, powerful, engaged debate without, you know, falling down into name calling and
Yeah.
social media attacks.
Yeah.
We've lost the ability
Yeah.
for discourse,
Yeah.
and it happens a lot. And a lot of the issues are the fact that we just don't talk about anything anymore because
No.
it is either politically incorrect or inappropriate to
Yeah.
talk about difficult, challenging issues,
Yeah.
and therefore we'll assure ourselves that we'll solve none of them
Yes.
because we're afraid to talk about them, right? Whether irrespective of the social or political issue or economic issue of the day, sometimes you just need to sit around a table with opposing viewpoints, right? And
Yeah.
especially in situations where you need consensus, but you can't get consensus.
Mhm.
This is where I fall on Dr. Sam Kainer's work on facilitation. And he's got something called the gradients of agreement.
Mhm.
And it goes from 1 to 5, from I don't support this at all to I wholeheartedly agree.
Mhm.
So what I'm trying to get is I'm pushing everybody towards 5.
Mhm.
I know in a room of 10, I'm probably going to get 2 or 3 of them there.
Yes.
I'm going to get a 3 or 4 4s and a couple of hesitant 3s.
Yes.
But that's what success looks like.
Yes.
Your gradients of agreement means I don't necessarily agree to all the parts of this. I oppose some of it, but
Yeah.
in totality, this is a movement in the right direction.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
because you know it's and you know let's light the candle on the stick of TNT. We have this habit nowadays of labeling ideas and positions as right wing, left wing,
Oh,
far
yeah.
left,
Yes.
far right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And as soon as you label somebody far right,
Yeah.
then you no longer have the ability to listen to them.
Yeah.
Because you just shut everything down that they have to say. And we've lost that ability to
Yeah.
get into a forum like this and debate an issue where you and I may have opposing viewpoints.
Yeah.
And in the end, like you said, we may not come apart with any agreement whatsoever, but we've
Mhm.
had the cordial ability to present opposing
Yes.
viewpoints.
Yes. Yes.
We
Yes.
actually listened to the other one.
Yes.
We countered, and it's the old Robertson rules. And I think it's Robertson rules, and I may be wrong.
Roberts.
Robert's rule of debate,
Yes.
where there's a question posed, you get 5 minutes for,
Yep.
I get 5 minutes against,
Yep.
you get a 1 minute rebuttal, I get a 1 minute rebuttal, and then we discuss in the open forum.
Yep.
Could you imagine in today's world somebody having to sit there and listen to me
No.
tear apart their argument for
No.
5 minutes without them having the ability to speak?
No. No. No.
People can't do that.
No. Several ideas just came to mind here. The constraints that we burden ourselves with, and these are there are real constraints. There are things you cannot do. Humans cannot fly unless they're in airplanes. It's as simple as that. Gravity does exist, and she doesn't care if you decide to jump off the building. So there are real constraints. But it's the fear factor that I think is core to often enough our entire culture as a society. we are afraid. We're afraid to speak. We're afraid to think. We're afraid. We're afraid. We're afraid. Where opinion has replaced logical thinking, and any approach to say considered scientific reasoning, even if it's not scientific, considered reasoning. So opinion rises to the top of the medium. We are also controlled on a very personal level by fear. I'm afraid someone might think of me in this way as opposed to that way. And many years ago, and this is not putting any stars on my report card, but many years ago, I gave all that up. I said, I don't really give a damn what you think about me. I'm also of an age, with a gray beard and no hair that says, what are you going to do? Okay. Like, what is it that you're going to do that is going to have any real impact on me?
Yeah,
Very little. So once you take the fear, not to say you give it up, because it's good to be afraid, okay, of certain things. But once you eliminate the need to transfer, go back to the word transference, because you're so afraid, you're going to transfer all of your issues, your risks, your whatever, to a third party because you can't handle it. You've lost, and you've lost big time. Right?
Oh yeah.
And it goes back to, and I think we talked about this in a previous discussion. It's about respect. That first time I went to China, where I could not read the language, still can't, could not speak the language, still can't. Yet I wanted to stay in a Chinese hotel in a Chinese district in downtown Shanghai, which was not surrounded by expats. Yeah. Was I afraid? Damn right I was afraid. It just, how do you handle it? You bite the bullet and you move on. You're there for 2 weeks. What are you going to do? Stop eating? Curl up in fetal position and stay in your hotel room? Come on, you just can't do that. It's not good for you. It's about respecting yourself, recognizing you are stronger than you often enough think you are. Stop being self-judgmental, and that if you respect others, they may actually respect you in return. Now, there's a whole spectrum of respect in that, from others, from we're not going to kill you, all the way to we're going to say hello to you, at least that.
Oh, by far. The challenge we have in today's world, though, is, for example, I'm a new entrepreneur. I'm trying to build a presence.
Yeah.
The challenge with that is that everything I say on any forum is tied back to me and my business.
Exactly.
I'm also a professor.
Yes.
I teach for an institution that has a certain set of values.
Yes.
I have to tread that line.
Yes.
Because if I say something, even if I have the conviction to say it, the consequences of being tagged, like I said, far right, far left, whatever it may be, are real and impactful. Because I'll give you one example. I had an individual, when I said something about a piece of Ontario legislation, went after me and wouldn't let go, to the point where he was going to all of my social media profile, to my business website, and pulling quotes down. You said this 2 days ago on your business site. You said this 3 days ago on Facebook. And it got to the point where he was searching through my entire presence on the internet and basically, under not a true, totally transparent veil, threatening my very presence on the internet. So I realized at that point I had to back down.
Yep.
And I politely thanked him for showing that. I said, I didn't understand that. I get what you mean.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. In reality, I meant none of it.
Yeah, no, of course not.
But this individual had the ability to go after,
Yep.
and we've seen this with protests that exist in today's world, where if you decide to take one side or the other, you're going to face the wrath of the
Yep.
followers
Yep.
that
Yeah.
could tank your entire business presence
Yes.
and affect not only you, but we were talking about before, the team, right? Think of Bud Light. We all remember what happened to Bud Light.
Yes.
Okay. They hired Dylan Mulvaney, didn't quite go the way they thought it would. Fair enough. And the boycott caused significant financial loss. But think about the 20,000 employees who were at risk of losing their jobs
Yep.
through no fault of their own because of a decision to hire an influencer and the subsequent boycott because of that influencer.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Right? You now have the 20,000 innocent people in the world in today's economy, when jobs are not open and tripping over,
Exactly.
get impacted by that kind of decision. So my presence right now on the internet is very well managed.
Yes.
And I'm very careful about what I do say in certain areas.
Yeah. Well, once again, it goes back to my favorite little,
Yeah.
what I call my doohickey.
Yeah.
Which
I call it my texting device.
Your
My wife gets
texting
mad at
device?
that.
Yeah, mine is, this is the thing I hate most. And because it's just, never mind. It's just one of those things, but this is where opinion has replaced intelligent reasoning.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, it's actually undermined any possibility for respect, which includes not just a respect of, for the other person, but respect for the position that they may hold. You cannot respect the position that someone holds if you, by your opinion, is going to shout to the rest of the world that they're wrong.
Yeah.
With no potential, even possible rationale to support your position. There's nothing wrong with open, honest debate.
Nope.
But this isn't debate. This is opinion.
Yep. And
That's all it is.
And when you counter a narrative in somebody's echo chamber, wow. They do not like being challenged.
No. And it gets back to some of the other threads we were talking about. This is isolationist.
Oh, very much.
It's you in your chamber. You just use the term. This is your chamber. Right. And you don't really have to go outside of this. Oh, you've got 17 million, followers. It has nothing to do with anything. This is your chamber where you could scream and yell. You might as well be in a bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's also a chamber, but that's a different issue.
But if you surround yourself by people who have the same belief set as you do, you create that echo chamber. And this happens a lot. It's like when you put people in a room that love a certain politician, they're going to come out loving that politician more.
Of course. It gets me back to, the guide to resilience thinking. I mean, diversity. There's no diversity here.
You have to create it. Yeah.
Well, and if you create it, you have the issue of what is it going to do to you? That's what it's going to do for you. It's
to you.
going to do to you.
Yes.
All right. So your diversity, if it doesn't comply with everybody else's, I'll call it standard of normal.
Yeah.
Whatever the hell that is, then your diversity is not useful. Or there's the utilitarian approach to diversity, which is you could be as diverse as you want within the context that we find acceptable. Okay, that's a problem right there. Just the language alone is a problem because those words don't go together. Right. this isn't connectivity. This is just stimulus response. This is this is bad psychology, if you will. I just got Skinnerism's approach, or Skinner's approach to psychology. I'm sure I'm going to get feedback on that one, but let's move on. This is not about feedback loops, because you're not really interested in what other people have to say.
No.
This is not adaptive systems thinking. You're not going to adapt to what somebody else. You're going to entrench yourself. You're going to actually go into a concrete mode. This is my position, that's your position, and we're not going to talk. So we're not going to adapt. I'm not learning anything. I'm learning not to learn from someone else.
Am I listening to learn, or am I listening to respond?
I'm listening to respond. It's Skinnerism, stimulus response. That's all it is.
And
and then this doesn't broaden participation, it limits it. Hence, I already mentioned it. And it's certainly not polycentric.
no,
Because you're not, this is too many people with too many opinions, that you either wade through in order to assess and analyze, or you simply ignore. And we live in a world where many of us simply ignore. You use the term influencer. I find that to be such a strangely fascinating and totally banal word. I mean, there's, influencers for me wrote, Hamlet. That's an influencer. And he didn't, direct it at me. He left it as part of my heritage where I can learn something from it from within my own context and perspective. Right? He didn't tell me what to think or even how to think. Right? I've actually recently gone out on a limb talking to some English teachers, one of whom absolutely loves Hamlet. I've always hated Hamlet because I couldn't stand the character, and the play drives me crazy. But recently I was on a tear where I had to do something other than, writing PowerPoint slides or creating PowerPoint slides. So I sat down and I read Hamlet all in one sitting from beginning to end. And I couldn't stop laughing. People said, what are you laughing about? I said, it's operatic. One of the things about operas is the song. So each section, each aria, each duet stands on its own. They just happen to be pearls that are, strung together into what is called a plot. Okay. The plot actually is irrelevant. You don't care if Figaro gets married or not. You really don't care. Right? What you really want to do is cry your eyes out when Mimi dies in La Boheme, because that's what Puccini is doing to you. He's just taking you to the crying room. Okay, he doesn't care about the Bohemians in La Boheme. They're anybody who does an analysis, and I did see an analysis of people who said, well, the Bohemians went on to become an artist and a this and a that. I said, you don't get the point of the opera. Puccini didn't give a flying hoot about these people. They were fringe people in Paris of the time. And the whole point was one aria or duet after another. So if you go back and read Hamlet, never mind see it performed, because it's going to be performed as a play. But I read it from scene to scene to scene, and I realized, oh, the language in this play is so racy. It is just like, we're not even talking subtle sexual innuendo. There are scenes in there where I go, do people know what's being said here?
Probably because very few have never actually read it.
Do they realize how funny this is? Do they realize that, when you get a ghost appearing, that you're actually, Shakespeare as the writer, the playwright, is actually pandering to the unwashed crowd in the pit, because, it's about ghosts. And I'm like, folks, take the Freudian interpretation and park it somewhere. Don't worry about his relationship to his mother in the bedroom. Who cares? Okay. I mean, what does he do? He kills an old man who's eavesdropping behind the arras, the drape. That is phenomenally outrageous, to say the least. You get the scene with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who were his buddies from school. Those two are weird. They're really strange people. And why are they even in there? What are they supposed to accomplish? Very little, other than being this quasi operatic moment that probably has the people in the pits howling about who these people are and what they're saying. So I revisited Hamlet thinking I've got to go back and reread it because I think it's an actual comedy. According to Aristotelian philosophy, if the main characters die at the end, it's a tragedy. If they all live, it's a comedy. And I went, no, I think you're just too narrow in your understanding of comedy. It doesn't matter that they die. It's how they get there that's really the fun part. So it's how off the wall do you actually need to be in order to think in terms that are not standard, not just opinion? Yeah, it's a risk to do that kind of thinking.
It is. And it's funny when you think about having the time to read that and the attention span that device in your hand now creates for the modern generation.
Yeah.
To be able to sit down and read a play like that section by section
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
in one sitting,
Yeah.
and to be able to relate from one to the next, next.
Yeah.
That is not the kind of focus and attention span that we create through this use of short-term snippets and reels and shorts and things along that line.
Yeah. And so, when to get back to our original series of points, managing risk in terms of a preparedness plan really needs our attention that goes beyond the narrow span that our current culture considers useful, possibly valuable. Maybe they don't even use terms like that. We have to think of that connectivity. We have to think of the stakeholder groups. We have to think beyond just my immediate, I can call 911 in an emergency. Yeah, you can, but it's too limited. So as always, this has been delightful.
Yes, absolutely. We're solving the world one conversation at a time.
Yes. And boy, does the world needs salvation.
Oh, I think so, in a few places.
All right. See you next week.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.